If you've ever headed out along the coast of northern New Zealand, anywhere from Raglan across to Ohiwa Harbour and north, you must have noticed that tough-looking crowd standing along the shoreline. It's our mangrove forest, and it's been standing there for 10,000 years. Avicennia marina, also known as the grey mangrove, is one of the superheroes of environmental adaptation. Our mangrove is an evergreen that grows anywhere from 0.5 metre to 8 metres tall. Mangroves are plants that have invaded a spot no one else wanted. You know that murky zone between sea and land? Now there they've created one of the world's most productive ecosystems. Mangroves live beyond the eelgrass between the high and mid-tide marks. From here the landscape becomes salt marsh, and higher up it becomes forest. And this is an incredibly difficult place to live. For starters, it's flooded and uncovered twice a day. It's subjected to wind, to waves and tidal action, and that makes standing upright or staying upright very difficult indeed. Of course, there's no hiding from the bleaching sun. But here's another one. The salt water has got a concentration that's 17 times higher than the fluids inside the mangrove plant itself. But the mangrove is extraordinary. To cope with these problems, mangroves must have special leaves, special roots, and well-protected small flowers. They also have unique methods of reproduction that do not rely on seeds. The mangrove's ancestors were land plants, but at some point they began to migrate into the ocean, and that was no easy trip. On the way, the mangrove had to become highly specialized, not just to survive, but to thrive in an incredibly hostile environment. Around the world, there are some 50 species of mangroves, but only one, Avicennia marina, can tolerate New Zealand's cooler conditions. There's hardly a plant on the planet that can lay claim to the work ethic of the mangrove. Productivity, measured in terms of leaf litter alone, is about 8 tonnes a year per hectare, which is much more than tropical rainforests or even prime New Zealand pasture. This is a plant that lives in water, but the irony is it has trouble getting the stuff. There's one more thing that mangroves have to overcome: dehydration due to something we know as osmosis. Now, osmosis is a natural process whereby water passes through a biological membrane in an attempt to create a balance between different salt concentrations. The mangrove will tolerate a lot more salt in its sap than land plants, but the salt water surrounding the mangroves would effectively suck them dry given half a chance. So the mangrove has developed leaves with special adaptations to stop them drying out. The upper surface is thick and waxy, and it reflects the light, so it keeps the temperatures down and therefore slows down evaporation. Now that prevents the leaf from dehydration, from drying out. Now every leaf has got about 2,000 salt glands that are flat tack excreting brine just to keep the internal salt levels down. On the rough underside of the leaf are breathing holes, and they are protected by clever T-shaped waxed hairs that trap moist air and prevent it being stolen by the wind. All life needs oxygen. Land-based plants extract oxygen from the soil they grow in. But this sticky, pongy, waterlogged and fatty, greasy mud contains not a bubble of oxygen. Ordinary plants would soon suffocate in this stuff. But the cunning little mangrove has developed a very specialized root system called pneumatophores, and they stick up out of the mud so that they can breathe air. Now, if you cut one of those, you can see what they're made of. The wall of the pneumatophore has got many little holes in it. They're called lenticels, and they can open and close, letting the air in and keeping the water out. The other major problem for the average mangrove is that the lack of oxygen in the soil prevents it putting down deep roots, giving it a stability problem. So instead of sending down deep roots like land trees, mangroves lay out very broad rafts of interlaced, shallow roots. You can easily follow the root system of a single tree by tracing its pneumatophores across the mudflats. This tree can be about 25 times its area in terms of its root mass. And that means that this tree ends up right over there. Now, what all the individual mangroves do is they stand united by interlacing their roots like that. And they form a mat which gives the forest an enormous stability. As well as providing oxygen, the many pneumatophores slow down the flow of the water. This lets the particles suspended in it settle amongst the trees, steadily building up the ground around them and helping to create a coastal barrier against foreshore erosion. Above the water, the mangrove's flowers are beautiful miniatures, but also tough enough to cope with wind and salt spray. Flowers come in clusters, but don't open all at once. This ensures the plant has a greater chance of being fertilized if bad weather interrupts insect pollination. The flowers have a powerful perfume too, a heady blend of tropical fruits and sweet cherry. Oh yeah, they can be smelled for many, many hundreds of meters, especially by interested insects. Living in tidal waters, sometimes submerged and often disturbed by waves and water movements, makes it impossible for normal seeds to germinate. So mangroves don't have seeds or fruits. At the base of the flower, an embryo develops in its own protective case. Now, this little package is called a propagule. Around Christmas time, the propagules drop from the trees and float away on the tide to settle on another part of the coast. Now, as they float, they swell up, and they swell up so much that they burst their cases, and that means their buoyancy is gone. They just sink to the bottom, and as they unfold, they take root. Once the mini mangrove has settled, 4 roots begin to grow, any 2 of which will penetrate the sediment, grow down into the soil, and start to hold the plant upright. At the same time, stiff cotyledons open and help to stabilize it against the ever-moving water. The outsized cotyledons act like a packed lunch, providing the energy needed to feed the young plant until it has grown roots and proper leaves. Of course, the mangrove isn't the only one keen on this swampy part of our landscape. When you look closely, this special neighborhood is full of life. Phytoplankton loves it here. It picks up all the nutrients that come downstream with the water, even runoff from the land. Now, in these shallow harbors and estuarine conditions, the temperature of the water is a lot higher. That means that photosynthesis is very good, and that boosts phytoplankton production. Oh yeah, there's plenty of food around here for more familiar creatures. Barnacles, rock oysters, mussels, cockles, and all sorts of worms feed on the phytoplankton. Some snails and barnacles move right in and attach themselves to the mangroves, treating them a little bit like a wooden shoreline. Then there's the hungry, yellow-eyed mullet, which swallows about 1 kilogram of silt and floating food every day. Mangroves, too, are a nursery for smaller fish species that feed within its swampy and protective habitat. Now, up to 75% of all coastal fish benefits in some way from mangrove forests. At various tide times, larger fish and birds feed on the plentiful smaller fish in and around the mangrove forest. The mud crab jumps into action when the tide's out. It lives in a burrow, but scuttles out on sorties to feed. It has specially adapted jaws with fine hairs that strain out plankton from scoops of silt mined from the muddy surface. The kingfisher considers mud crab for dinner from its nearby perch. When it spots one straying too far from its burrow, it swoops across the flats to scoop it up. And the mangrove cycle continues as the sun goes down on this amazing habitat. Oh yeah, there's a lot more to the mangrove than meets the eye.